Hi, and welcome to Made AI's first webinar. Today we're talking about tariffs. This is such a fun topic. And I'm here with my co-founder, Rob Marlinsky. But first, let me tell you who I am. I'm Elle Black. It's nice to meet you. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Made AI. We are building a commerce layer for emerging brands that connects them directly to factories and uses AI to manage all of that manual task. But we're not going to talk about Made right now. What we're going to talk about is tariffs. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, why should I believe this girl? Well, let me tell you, I've been working in manufacturing since 2011. Boy, I'm really aging myself there, but I've been working long enough that I remember the first time Trump was rolling out tariffs. I remember what happened, what didn't happen. I remember the impacts that the administration at that time said were going to work and what actually happened. So we're going to dive into all of that today. But first, I want to introduce you to, like I said, Rob Marlinsky.
Everybody, thanks for joining. Great to see how many people signed up for this. And that there's a huge need from brands out there that want to have, learn what's going on here. As Elle mentioned, I am a co-founder of Made. I'm the COO. My background, I've spent the last 10 years as a two-time e-commerce store founder and in the product manufacturing space. So just like many of the listeners here, I've gone through the challenges of scaling a brand to 7 and 8 figures. I remember when I was a brand owner and I was hearing things about there's going to be a 25% tariff and having that feeling in my gut, what am I going to do? This is going to impact my business. How am I going to afford to pay for these extra tariffs? Am I going to increase my prices? There's a lot of uncertainty as a brand. And there's a lot of ways that I learned throughout the last 10 years on how to navigate this where it's not going to affect your brand, and you can be effective with what's going on in the market. So I'm excited to share you guys some of my insight, what we're doing at Made as well, and how that can help you. Give you some insight on things like the HS codes that are really important. That's just a simple thing that every brand owner should know about, that many that don't know about it. So yeah, looking forward to diving into this, and feel free to drop any questions you have in the little chat box while we're going through this, and we'll get to them at the end, or just answer them live for you guys.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. Yeah, I'm super excited to talk about this. When we were thinking about this webinar, Rob and I were like, what do we want to talk about in the tariff perspective? And the first thing that we really want to talk about is just explaining the mechanics of how it works. And so we're going to get into that. Then we're going to talk about some of our predictions, and then we're going to show you exactly how you can, what we call, hack your tariff. Now, in order to hack your tariff, you have to understand how the system works, which is why we're going to show you that. And a little disclaimer, we're not going to tell you anything illegal. Don't worry. No one's going to jail because of this. But our mission really, and our why we get up and do this work every single day is because both Rob and I have been brand owners. We've been in supply chain, we've been in manufacturing, we've been product developers, working with manufacturers all over the world, creating amazing products that people love, and getting hit with a 3%, 4%, 5% tariff on, on your imports, and realizing how that eats into your margins. We're pro small business. We believe in that, and we're here to make that life easier. So that's our worldview. That being said, Rob and I were super excited to do this webinar, and the demand has been amazing. There's so many participants from all over the world. But I do want to encourage you guys, if you have questions, if you have comments, if you want a clarification, if I'm talking too fast, if you didn't understand what Rob said, drop us a little note. We will definitely answer your questions. Now, that being said, let's dive right in, shall we?
Yeah.
Rob?
I think let's just kick it off first. Let's talk about what's changing in the environment, why it matters. If we could start there, because every day when you're looking online, whether you're on social media or you're on news channels, you're seeing something new. And it's like, how do you keep up with it? It's like every 5 minutes, something new's coming up.
Yeah.
I know you're up to date on it. I try to stay up to date on it, but why don't you just give everybody a quick background on like the latest 4 things or what's new?
Yeah, so
Today.
Today, here's what's happening today. So just when we thought the world of global trade might get a little less chaotic, we got Trump back with his signature move tariffs, right? Like in the first 10 days of his administration, he came out hot with slapping 25% tariffs on Canada, on Mexico, which is not what he did the first time, and then an additional 10% on China. Now, it's really interesting to kind of like look at that because it was specifically a tariff on the finished goods. That's not what's making news today, though. Today, what's making news is that Trump is now talking about tariffs on raw materials. Understanding the difference between, an import on a raw material versus a finished good That's where HS codes come in. Now, we're going to come back to that. But first, I want to talk about why Trump would want to tax raw materials instead of finished goods and what happens next. So the tariff on raw materials, they're really designed to force domestic production. The idea is, okay, if you're a supplier in the US, you have to import raw materials to make your widget, right? To make your Stanley Cup, for example. You have to get that aluminum, you have to get that steel from somewhere. What Trump hopes to accomplish with this raw materials tariff is to turn on the American manufacturing engine at the raw materials level. I don't think it's going to work. That's just what I think. And I think that because he did this before. When he did this in 2018, I believe the outcome of this raw materials tariff was that it created 11,000 jobs in the manufacturing industry, but it eliminated 200,000. So it was a net loss. And I think it's a really important thing for us to look at these, look at this from that perspective. But that's not the only reason why the administration is doing that. Of course, they want to create this engine to try to spur domestic production, which I'm a big fan of. I think that would be great. But he also wants to hurt foreign competitors at the source. That's really his other strategy here, is like, how do we hurt our enemies, so to speak. He also wants us to reduce dependency on imports. Listen, I don't have to tell you guys this, you know this. We rely on countries like China more than ever before. But here is the small plot twist. US manufacturers today still rely on raw imports. We just don't have enough we don't have the mining capability. And it's a little bit complicated, but also we have a lot of regulations that prevent us from being able to mine and create these natural raw resources from the earth, these natural raw materials that allow us to actually do that. Now, do I think do I think the tariffs are gonna work? Time will tell. Like I said, if history tells us anything, it's gonna be a net loss, but maybe something's different this time.
A question for you. Do you think that the US will ever have the capabilities to produce enough raw material or work with friendly partners?
Let me just get out my let me get out my what is it, like my my little magic scope and see if I can read into the future, my crystal ball. I don't. I mean, that's a hot take, hot opinion. I don't. I think we need to, I think there's a lot. Look, manufacturing is complicated. Many people in the US specifically don't understand how necessary and complicated it really is. But it's super complex. Making things is hard. And as Americans, we don't know how to make things. We've lost that muscle. When I talk about it with my mom and my dad, the way I explain it is Americans barely care how we make our food. We barely care about the soil that we're growing our food in. We eat processed food all the time, all day long. And that's what fuels us. We care even less about how all the other things in our world are made. And so do I think, Gen Z is starting to care a little bit more? Yes. I think that, I think we're going to try really hard, but it's going to take a big, big change. Something like what the administration is doing now for us to actually rebuild that muscle. And I think it's a 30-year time horizon before we see any impact.
I agree. It's definitely not an overnight thing. It's just not possible to be. We have so much work to do.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Who do you think is, I get this question a lot from brands. They're saying like, how's this going to affect me? What's going on? But, who's seeing the biggest impact right now? Like I personally have my opinion on who's seeing the biggest impact. Everybody does, but who do you think is seeing the biggest impact?
Well, when you look at the US manufacturing market, it's huge, 2.3 trillion. Yes, that's billion with a T. And that counts for 10.2% of the US economy. In fact, it employs 15.6 million people, but manufacturing requires and relies on importing raw materials to stay competitive. So if the tariffs just make it more expensive to build stuff here, are we going to be able to build stuff here?
No.
That's kind of the question. So who's going to be impacted when we look at this huge market that the manufacturing industry is huge? Biggest players, car manufacturers. They are making things out of steel and aluminum, and we just made it 25% more expensive for them to do that work. Who do I think will fill that? The American people. Now, I will tell you, in a past life, and you can double click on this later, in a past life, I worked on a 3D printed car company. That's actually how I came up through manufacturing. I do imagine, people are creative. We might find that we move towards 3D printed cars because we don't need to import and pay that 25% on aluminum and steel. Now, there are still aluminum and steel in a 3D printed car, just to be clear. But I do think there's a lot of really cool advances happening in advanced manufacturing. And I think some new materials are being developed, and it's exciting. That's really exciting. I do think that what Trump is trying to do is by putting these tariffs on aluminum and steel, and again, it's going to be car makers, appliance makers, so GEs of the world, they're going to get hit really hard. I think what he's trying to do is also force us to get creative and imagine products made out of different materials. I will say, what most people don't know is the US is a hotbed of innovation when it comes to material development. It is super, like the stuff coming out of our national labs is amazing. What we can do with advanced materials and with advanced manufacturing technologies is unbelievable.
Great. I think the consumers are going to see a little effect of this as well, personally, because it's got to get passed off somewhere, in my opinion. Bigger brands are going to be able to absorb some of these costs, but a lot of these small businesses, they're not going to be able to absorb all that. That would drastically affect their business. So I think that some of this is going to have to be passed on to the consumer at the end of the day, in my opinion.
That's the ugly secret. At the end of the day, we as consumers are going to feel this squeeze. I really think we are. Now, I'm an optimist. So I will always say, crisis is the best way to actually spur innovation. And, what's the saying that necessity is the mother of all innovation? I do hope, I'm very optimistic that this is going to spur a renaissance of American creativity. That's what we as, Americans do best. We come up with solutions that are new, novel, and creative. So I'm hopeful that that's what happens. But we'll see.
Yeah, so is that what you think? We're going to see this great supply chain shuffle and start innovating things like that? Or are we going to see this huge trade war play out?
I think there's a trade war.
I think we're seeing a trade war right now, right? So,
what I think is, again, the average consumer is so disconnected from what's happening on a global scale from a trade war perspective and doesn't understand or really care about how products are made, that they won't figure out that this is something to be watching until all of a sudden everything costs 25% more. And then people are going to double click and say, what's going on here? What do I need to pay attention to? What do I need to change? What alternatives are there? And what is actually happening?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I think that's you did a great job of explaining what's going on in the market right now. I know.
Rob, I'm going to just double click on some of the questions and then kind of rapid fire them at you.
Yeah.
First things first, Rob, how do tariffs work?
That's a great question. So tariff, how it's going to work is it's going to be very product category specific, kind of like you were talking about earlier. It's going to be on that raw material that's coming in, and it's going to be affecting those industries like the auto industry and the appliance industry and aerospace and things like that. And those are very specific. So I know the brands that are listening here today are worried, how are tariffs going to affect them? And there's a lot of products that are going to be made that aren't going to see effects from these tariffs. And that's because those could get moved to countries that these tariffs aren't going to be applied on. There's not going to be a trade war like that's going to be going on with China, that could be going on with Vietnam for some of these products that we're making.
Yeah.
But essentially, it's going to come down to what country you're making that product and what material it is, what that product category is, and that's how it's going to affect you.
How do products get categorized? Like what are the actual mechanics? How does this work?
So products is categorized by HS codes.
What's the HS code?
Right? Most brands don't know what an HS code is. They rely on their factory or they rely on their freight agent for it, but it's really one of the core things that I personally think every brand needs to know what their HS code is. And the easiest way that I like to tell brands is think of it as your SKU. It's your unique product identifier to classify that product that you're importing into the US. So every product has a ID number that's used for global trade. This product, when it gets imported or exported, it's going to be marked by a 6-digit code. And that code is what's recognized globally. So whether you're importing that into the US, Mexico, Italy, that code is still going to be recognized by anywhere they are importing or exporting that product to. And then what happens is once that's getting imported in, the customs officials are going to look up that code, and that's what they're going to use to determine what the duty is, what the tax is. Is there any import rules that apply to this specific product? Maybe there is an additional tariff on it. Maybe it's actually an import rule where it's not even allowed to be imported into that country. So that's why knowing your HS codes are really important.
But they sound super important. And like it's almost like this is the secret, right? Like the secret to getting around and understanding tariffs is an HS code. Does that sound right?
Absolutely. Like that's the core of it. That's how you're identifying what that product is that you're bringing in.
How do HS codes work?
Well, before I get into how they work, there's two things that the brands want to know about what they are. Is why it even really matters is one, it's going to be controlling your costs.
Okay.
So we're going to get into that a little bit deeper, but that HS code, it's very, very specific, and I'll walk through some examples on how specific it is, on how that's going to control what the cost is of what you're actually paying for that product, because there are a lot of different classifications, and just changing one number could double what you're paying for a tax on it.
Wow.
And then another things that brands need to consider is if you use the wrong HS code, this could cause customs clearance issues, which is going to result in delays. You're going to have to file additional paperwork, and then most likely it's going to result in fines too as well. So you're paying more money out of pocket that you already were planning on, and now you don't have your inventory. So it's just a ripple effect of not knowing the basics of it.
Okay. How does a brand find their HS code? Like, do I just Google it? Like what?
You can Google it. You could work with your freight agents. You could work with your factory on it. Luckily for viewers here, we have our own tool at Made that we're gonna let all of our viewers have access to, and it will just do a product audit for you, and you'll be able to actually identify the exact HS code you should be using for your specific product, and it'll give you the exact reason why. So just kind of want to walk through beforehand what an HS code even is and how it works. So like I said, every HS code is broken into 6 unique numbers, and those six unique numbers all represent something different. So for an example, let's just use chocolate bars. I know you love chocolate.
I love chocolate.
She's got chocolate bars sitting next to her, and it's first thing in the morning already. So,
Hey.
so
Rob, we listen and we do not judge.
so chocolate bar, the HS code that a brand would use for that is 180632. So that's 6
Who
numbers.
knew that?
So if we break it into numbers by 2, the first two digits of this HS code are the 18, and that's considered the chapter, which is just a broad category of goods. So for this instance, the 18 represents cocoa for the chocolate. The next 2 digits, which would be 06, that represents a heading, which is going to be a more specific classification of what that good is. So for the chocolate bar, the 06 is going to represent chocolate or other food preparations containing cocoa, because once again, that goes back to what the chapter good was. And then the final 2 is where you kind of get into the nitty gritty, where you want to be really specific on this, because this is where you could really start to see a difference in what you're paying in duties. So the final 2 digits are going to be the subheading. So for example, for the chocolate bar, 32 would be the final 6 digits. And this represents a chocolate that's made in blocks, slabs, or a bar for this example. To give you guys like an example of how simple it is to make a mistake on an HS code and how drastically it could affect you. If you think of a t-shirt, for example, just a plain white t-shirt. Everybody thinks, well, yeah, it's a t-shirt. Why can't I just put it under the general HS code for t-shirts? You could do that. But when you get into the specifics, that's where you really start to see the difference. So if you're doing a shirt that is made of 100% cotton, for example, that's going to have an HS code of 6109.10, versus if you did one that was synthetic, let's say a polyester shirt, that's going to still start with a 6109, but it's going to change the last 2 digits, which is going to be a 0.90.
And so what is the difference in duty on those 2 numbers?
2 times the amount. So the cotton shirt would be 16.5%, but by changing the final 2 digits, that would increase it to 32%, because that's synthetic is taxed at a higher rate.
Yeah. Boy, this all sounds so complicated.
It is, for the brand that has so much going on and they don't know about it. Yeah. Maybe are trusting their factory to do these things, but a factory is moving fast and maybe they're putting a code that benefits them if they're doing like a TDP shipment out of their country for them. It's really a lot to know for a brand.
So typically, who chooses the HS code? Is that what the factory does?
It's all up to the brand. I truly believe most brands are relying on their freight forwarder or their factory to do it. I think the best practice is for a brand to provide the HS code that they want to be using, because the brand is the one that could take the time to do the research and really identify, hey, this is the exact HS code based on what my product is down to the T of every piece of material in it, what the functionality is of it. That takes time, though. That takes a lot of time, and brands don't have a lot of time to do that. So I think brands just rely and hope that their factory or their freight forwarder has their best interest in mind.
Yeah. So speaking of time, Rob, what can be done? What solutions do we have?
So one of the cool tools that we've been building here at Made that we want to be able to share with everybody here, just to help you make sure that you're using the right HS code, so you're not experiencing custom delays or overpaying in duties or having any of these compliance issues, is we created an AI tariff audit. So I'd love to kind of give you guys like a quick little walkthrough of how this works.
This is a very cool tool. This is one of the fun things about working in a startup, and with the power of AI, you can just build tools so fast and give them away to everyone for free, because the complexity of actually building these tools is just dramatically reduced. And so when we were thinking about what tools would be helpful to this community of SMB merchants or brands, our customers, we realized that just a tariff tool would actually reduce, I could save them up to 90%, which is crazy, and also reduce the time that they were spending on this one thing by up to 19 hours. So we made a tool, and we're going to show you how it works.
We are going to.
Rob is working on that.
I am working on it.
I'm going to just browse over and check out some of the questions. We've got so many questions coming in here. So I'm going to kind of organize them. Oh, Rob, have you ever had, this is a fun question. Have you ever had a time when an HS code was in two different places? Are there HS codes can you have different HS codes?
Yeah, there's different documentation, and that's something that you really need to be double checking and relying on your freight forwarder using, because they could be putting in the HS code on a commercial invoice is one thing, and then having another piece of documentation for customs that is listed as another. So it's really important to cross-reference that and make sure everything's matching up, because that's just automatic red flag when you get to customs, is going to cause issues for you.
Okay, here's one more question, then we'll go over the demo. How easy/hard is it to change your HS code?
Very easy, actually, because every time that you're doing a shipment, you're filling out these commercial invoices and the import paperwork where you're listing what the product is. And when you're listing what that product is and the value of that product, you have to put that HS code. So your next shipment coming up, once you identify what the correct HS code is, you could be making sure that you're using that. Now, you don't need to be going through filing all these paperwork or anything confusing hard work like that, but it's knowing the right HS code, ensuring that your freight forwarder, or if you're using a factory, is using the correct HS code for you, and then you're double checking that documentation.
So it sounds like the HS code is the magic tool.
Yes.
Great. Let's see how it works.
Great. So this is our AI tariff assistant tool. Very simple to use. All you really have to do is drop a link to your product. Our tool will use AI technology to go through your product and link, and it'll assess your product and the product data and what it's constructed out of it. And then it will give you the suggestions that it recommends. And where it's pulling these HS codes from, L, is actually from the actual HS code database. So this isn't doing Google researches and going through old articles to find maybe this is what it is.
It's actually connected directly to the source.
Yeah, directly to the source. So this is the same thing that custom officials are referencing. So you're matching up exactly to what customs officials are using. And you'll see that it actually gives you 3 different examples. And believe it or not, like all 3 of these are taxed at a different rate, which is what I was talking about why you want to be really, really focused on what those final numbers are. But our tool is smart enough to ask you to confirm some really important details, because that's going to play a factor in what the right HS code is. So you're using the right information. There's no issues at customs and paying the right duty.
Yeah.
So I simply just informed it. They confirmed that, yes, this bag is made of synthetic material only, and that there's no genuine leather or anything else from that.
This is great.
And this is what it suggests for us to use.
This is fantastic.
Yeah.
So, all right, well, we are almost right at time. Rob, this has been so helpful. The question is, what if people are interested in this tool? What can they do? What are we going to do? How are we going to help these people?
Yeah, anybody that's on this call right now, we are going to, I'll drop a link for you guys so you can schedule a call with me and I'll do a product audit for you. So I can talk through what the HS codes are that it's giving you. I can answer any other supply chain questions that you have. All you just need to do is just, find some time that works on your schedule. We'll jump on for 20 minutes and then we'll go through your products. And if you want to go through more than one product, more than happy to do that because you can see how quick and easy it is to do it on this tool. And then you'll be able to have access to this tool as well, so you can do it in your own time.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you everyone for joining us for this webinar. This has been super fun. And again, we had such a great response, so we'll be doing more of them. If you have any other questions, feel free to send us an email. We're going to follow up and send you links to everything so you can get access to this. And we look forward to chatting with you soon.
Yes. Thanks for joining, everyone.